Hello and welcome back to the podcast. I've got a guest with me today who you would have seen all over your social media recently. So we had to get him on the podcast as soon as possible to tell us what it's all about and what's going on. So, Rowan Waller, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You are, as I mentioned, all over my socials at the moment. So, before we get into the reason why you're all over my socials at the moment, talk me through your journey in estate agency. How have we got to where we are today?
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I've been an estate agent for 20 years. So it's now 2 decades. So I joined in 2005 and started life at a countrywide PLC subsidiary, like I guess about half of estate agents do, which was Abbott's Countrywide over in Suffolk. I come from Ipswich and had a good run there, 4 or 5 years there, starting as neg, and within a very short space of time becoming lister. And then I suppose I was never called assistant manager, but effectively I was called number two. So that's what I was in the Stowmarket branch. And then moved across the country because of my wife, who ended up getting a job in Oxford. So decided I could be an estate agent anywhere really. Moved across, didn't take a transfer with Countrywide, decided I wanted to go independent. So took a job as a manager at Chancellors, which is independent, but it's a very big independent, and I'm not gonna. There's nothing wrong with being corporate, but it's a bit of a corporate independent. Did 5 years there as manager, and then decided it was time to set up on my own as a sort of as a true independent, like a one-man band. So that was Waller's Estate Agents in 2014. That took me through to 2023, which is when I then sold up and exited.
And how was that moving from sort of Ipswich to Oxford is a bit of mileage to say the least. How was it going from an area where I imagine you knew Ipswich like the back of your hand to an area like Oxford where you knew probably nobody apart from your partner, and that was about it. So how was that transferring from to a completely new city for yourself?
I tell you what, it was almost like liberating in a way, because I sort of had no expectations about what the Oxford market was really like, and the guys I was coming into work with definitely did. So when I came into an operation where they were saying, you really struggle to get properties on here. The competition's really fierce, and you never get more than like 1% as a fee. And actually, I'd been getting 2.25% was my average fee over at Abbott's. So I said, "Nah, we'll get 2%. I'll just get your average fee up to 2%." And I was young and full of beans at the time, so I had every belief. There was no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't just go out and get those fees. And that's exactly what I did. And I went out with a corporate educated attitude of going and knocking on doors and going and doing tout letters and going and being stubborn about the fee we were charging, and built that branch up, doubled the fees that we were getting actually, and doubled the business that we then took in that year. So we went, I think it was 150 grand operation, and then the end of the first year we did 300 grand. So they were very pleased with me, but it didn't come from any great specialism other than having been schooled by Countrywide in a place like Suffolk, where, to be honest, you had to get 2%, 2.5%. Otherwise, you were only getting £2,000, £2,500 £2,500 on what our average property value was over there, compared to a place like Oxford. So yeah, I think I kind of came in with no fear, and it worked out for me fine.
We used to find it a lot when I worked at the property franchise group. So about half the people we took on board had no experience whatsoever, and half of them did. And actually, the ones that had experience kind of got off to a better start and got their listings quicker, etc., and all that sort of stuff, because they kind of knew what to focus on. But the people with no experience, actually, when you looked at the end of the first sort of year or 18 months or so, generally had a better average fee than the agents that are established already. So do you think there's almost like a glass ceiling that people put on there, that kind of the fee in the local area, and go, you'll never get above 1% because it's Oxford and everyone charges 1%? Do you think agents kind of self-impose that on themselves sometimes?
Absolutely, they do, and then you can fall into the same trap. You can gradually undermine yourself, and then your fee can gradually come down unless you really sort of shake yourself every now and again and go, hang on, let's get back to basics. Why has my fee dropped because that's all the market's going to pay, or has my fee dropped because I'm no longer going and hand delivering a letter before the market appraisal? I'm no longer sending my post-market appraisal letter out within 24 hours. I'm no longer making a follow-up call the next day. And actually, when you go back to basics and ask for the fee, you tend to find that you can get it again.
Yeah, you see it a lot with things like financial services as well. When you get a brand new member of staff and you say, just phone people up, see if they're still looking for a house and see if they want to save some money on their mortgage. They're like, okay. And they're like, how many financial services appointments you get? And they're like, I got 5 today. And you speak to the established staff and they're like, I get 5 a month. Because they're like, they've had so many sort of no's sort of bash them back over the years sort of thing. They kind of like give up asking effectively. When you're kind of brand new, you're like fresh and doughy eyed to kind of just asking the question and kind of just go for maximum attack on it.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
really
talk me through the stage where you obviously you probably got sick of working for someone else by the sounds of it and decided to kind of go out on your own. Was there anything in particular that sort of happened that made you think you kind of want to go out and do your own thing? What was sort of talk me through that sort of stage of life?
it's uh, it's a retrospective answer. So I think at the time I really thought I hated my job, and I don't think I did. I think I'd become the wrong person for that job in that firm, and there was nothing really ultimately wrong about the way that they were going about doing business, but I no longer felt it was the way I wanted to go and do it. And it was a lot of work, and I'd done that to myself. So the other thing I did when I moved there was said, no, we'll do 8 till 8. Let's put that. I'll come in at 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll work till 8 o'clock at night. I had a wife who was then a girlfriend, who was doing. She worked in a hotel, so she was either off to work at 6 o'clock in the morning or she wasn't getting back till 10 o'clock at night. So it didn't bother me to go in before 9 o'clock, and it didn't bother me to work late because I tended to find I was working late anyway. So why don't we just make our open hours 12 hours long? And then it was kind of more or less every Saturday as well. And we would do 9 till 4, 9 till 5. So it was pretty much a full working day. And I had done that to myself quite happily and quite willingly when I was young and full of beans and trying to drive something and build something and get to £500,000 turnover and get on the ski trip and everything else I wanted to do before I had children. And the big difference was I had a baby. We had Layla, who's our eldest daughter, in 2013, and it was over the course of that year that my attitude started to change, and I started to resent the job I was in for the strictures that I'd imposed on myself. Right, it wasn't. Chancellors were not saying you have to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and work till 8 o'clock at night. Chancellors were saying you have to do 50 phone calls before 12 o'clock, and we don't want you to have any appointments. And I told myself, oh, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of that. You're telling me what to do. But it was me that was giving myself this framework of how I was going to do that for them. The biggest thing for me, which once again wasn't Chancellor's fault, was that I put Layla to bed one night at 7 o'clock or something on the Sunday night, and the next time I saw my daughter was the following Sunday morning, because every day that week I'd gone dead early, and I think it's because my assistant manager was off that week, so it was a peculiar week. But I'd gone in before she got out of bed in the morning, and I had come back after she'd gone to bed at night. And I guess I hadn't got up and helped in the night if she was waking up, but don't tell anyone. And I just ended up thinking at the end of that week, how have I managed to go a whole week without seeing somebody who lives in my house? And that's when I thought I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to leave and do something. And I don't really want to go and work for anyone else. And I kind of think I told myself that I wouldn't get on anywhere else. And that's probably not true either. So I decided to go and set up on my own. And I think to try and prove a point that there's a different way of doing it. And I'm not sure whether I ever did totally prove that point, but I did it for 9 years and built something, and it was built from scratch. And I suppose probably it's all because I was just ready for a new challenge. I just wanted to do something that was a bit different after having done more or less the same thing for 10 years. And that's all it was. I suddenly make these decisions and just do it.
So talk me through sort of the plan you had in action there. So obviously you had a young family at the time and obviously a partner, and sort of a relationship going there as well. And you sort of go out into the world and launch your own business from kind of a cold start, as you mentioned there. So you've got a completely blank diary and a sort of a mobile phone and a laptop sort of thing. What's sort of plan A? Where are the first instructions coming from? What's the sort of the direction you're heading in there?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So this is going to end up sounding slightly forced, this answer, or slightly cultivated. But I had no money. So I had enough money I bought myself a £300 DSLR camera, and I could budget for 6 months with Rightmove at half price. And I had a little bit of budget, which I wasted on leaflets. I mean, I got my first listing from a leaflet, so it wasn't entirely wasted. But I got robbed by a firm that I think just didn't bother delivering any. I never found anybody that ever had one of those leaflets, and that was £5 down the drain. I think I got a phone call in like the first week, and somebody offered me a double page spread in some magazine, and I thought, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So I went and blitzed £1,000 of like the £6,000 total that I had on that, and basically ran out of money really, really quickly. And then what I did start to do, I started networking. Which is a big part of how I built the business. So that's one side of how I went and found business. But in that networking, I found somebody who was in social media and said, right, if you've got no money, then you need to be leaning on the free stuff you can do. So focus on your socials. So I became quite heavy in social media, and it's before I'd ever really heard about personal brand and personal brand building, which people talk about a lot now. But I got involved in that really early doors, and having to find ways of I suppose, shouting above the noise, because I had no budget to force myself above the noise, and therefore I had to be interesting so that people would like and click and share and comment and then recommend me to their mates who were selling houses, even if they weren't selling houses themselves. So it became a lot of Rowan Waller estate agent stuff rather than Waller's estate agents stuff, and about what Rowan Waller was doing out there in the market, and mainly what Rowan Waller thought about the market and what was going on. So I ended up, becoming well known for doing these market updates whilst I was doing the barbecue, or I'd go for a walk around the park on a Tuesday morning. It became my regular time to get the phone out and tell people what was going on in the property market, what's just happened with interest rates, why does that really matter? And that became what I was known for. And that just led to people then, understanding that I must be an expert in the field. And when they were then saying, we want to talk to estate agents, but we don't want somebody who's the same as the others, I started to get invited out.
It sounds like you kind of went down the route of, give without asking, and kind of, I'm going to give information about the local market. I'm going to give information about the local interest. I'm going to give information about what's going on at the moment, sort of thing. How long before you sort of got some traction off the back of that and you were like, okay, this is kind of working? Really
soon. I mean, within enough time that I didn't get disenchanted doing it. So I think if it had been many months and nothing had happened, then I would have stopped. But even though you don't get necessarily business straight away, somebody going, I want to put my house on the market with you because you're talking sense. You did have people saying, if I was selling my house right now, I'd definitely use you because you're talking sense. And it just gave me enough encouragement to carry on doing it, because I thought, well, actually, at some point you are going to sell your house. Or at some point, if you keep on following this, you're going to recommend me to somebody who's selling their house. And also, if you're thinking it, then there's probably other people thinking it as well that just aren't necessarily liking, commenting, and sharing. So I just persevered with it. And it's when I was out and about and people would talk to me about the video that they'd seen, or they would already know who I was when somebody introduced me to them at some networking do, that I understood that this is working in the background. It's working away in the background, and it doesn't really cost me anything except a bit of time and a bit of prep.
And how long did you run the business? Because obviously you exited the business sort of some years later. How long did you have the business yourself before you exited?
So it was 9 years. It was, and I would have loved to have got to 10 years. It was always a kind of a bit of a milestone, but I was just ready to do it. And that actually, once again, it came down to that eldest daughter of mine. So it was 2023 I decided to sell. I started in 2014, and Layla was born in 2013. So I started when Layla was a 1-year-old, and I decided to stop when she was a 10-year-old, because I looked at her and I realized that I had a 10-year-old. And even though the purpose of what I'd done had been to kind of spend more time with my family, and even though Waller's had allowed me to ostensibly do that, because I would be able to knock off at 2:00 in the afternoon and go and pick them up from school, and I would be able to go to the school play when it was on, and I would be able to do all of these things, I was often just not present. So although I'd be at the school play, but I'd be definitely surreptitiously sort of checking my emails whilst they're up on the stage. And I just sort of realised that the last time I sort of looked at her properly, she was about 4 years old. And I kind of just had this sort of epiphanal moment where I thought, I'm missing a lot. Even though I'm there, I'm missing it. So this business, what it's become, it wasn't an unsuccessful business, but it was a business that wasn't really breaking any barriers, and it wasn't pushing on. And I didn't have the heart to really push it on. I sort of lost my will to do it. And I thought, why am I carrying on doing something that I'm not fully in love with, when I'm fully in love with these things that I really want to be doing? What's the solution? The solution's either to kind of step out and get someone else in to just manage it, like an MD, or it's just to flog it now. And I thought, to be honest, there was various legislation. I had a lettings business as well as a sales business. There's quite a lot of drama coming in down the line with lettings. And I thought, do I trust the market enough to think I've still got value in it next year? If I decide next year's the time to sell, if I wait for that 10-year anniversary so I can go, made it to 10 years, now time to cash out. And I thought, no, I'll flog now. So I did. And once again, that is me going, I'm going to make a decision, and then I'll just do it. And it's not always the best thing.
Right. It's always hindsight. Hindsight is always perhaps the exact science, isn't it? Kind of looking back, you always think, I could have done this or I could have done that, but at the time you haven't got that information to kind of work with.
Yeah, quite.
So you've spoken before historically about the impact of mental health in estate agencies. So obviously, there's ups and downs in estate agency, especially when you have your own business and you're the face of the business as well, and kind of you're on camera a lot, smiling, and Rowan's doing another update, whatever it may be. What's your sort of experience been on that side of things?
Yeah, that's really interesting because actually people would always say, "Oh, you're doing really well," and I would always think, I haven't said anything about whether I'm doing well or badly. I've just said how interest rates are going to affect the market this month, and people would see this content and think, "Oh, he must be doing fortunes," but actually it was always hard work. I mean, sometimes we'd make a 20 grand profit in a month. Sometimes I'd be sticking my hand in my pocket and having to pay my staff out of what was in our own bank account because just no fees had come in. And it was always up and down. And it was sometimes, like, in fact, I'd say feast or famine, but actually it felt more often that it was famine than feast, for definite. And I suppose you do look at what other people are doing and think, God, they're doing so well compared to, and actually you become a victim of maybe imposter syndrome, or maybe just letting comparison be the thief of joy, because you're not just sort of, however much I try and say to people, just run your own race. It does not matter how fast they're going. It's really hard to actually live by that principle. And that's where I think in my own mental health story, I think that's where I suffered, was thinking, God, why aren't I doing as well as them? Why ain't I driving around in a Lamborghini Huracan? And you see it, and you fall down that rabbit hole. And I can get out of it if I remind myself what I'm really in it for. I'm not in it to drive a Lamborghini. I'm in it to spend more time with my family and go on nice holidays with them, maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean expensive holidays. We've got a caravan that we tow around in the back of our car, and find a campsite that's 40 quid a night for 7 days, and that's lovely, and that's the sort of lifestyle I want to have. But watching social media, you end up convincing yourself that isn't the lifestyle you want. You really want all of these, these other riches.
Do you think that's got worse as time's gone by? So it doesn't take long to go onto Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever it may be, and there'll be a screenshot of someone's soul pipeline, or they're in front of a car or whatever it may be, and kind of like, look what I've done and look at me, sort of thing. Do you think that's kind of getting more and more prevalent today than it was historically?
I don't know. I think probably the media that we're consuming that information has changed. So, and it's probably more visible. So yes, I think you can, we used to definitely be aware of Rightmove pie charts, for example, 20 years ago. Those were still a thing. I don't know when social media really became a thing. Were we doing social media back in 2005? I feel like we weren't, but we were definitely comparing ourselves to Bucks estate agents in Stowmarket when we were trying to get to market share. And that was, I suppose, whether we weren't independent, we were corporate, but it was still our goal in life was to become market leader in Stowmarket. And I suppose that would have affected I don't know if it affected my mental health then, but maybe it affected my boss. I don't know. And but yeah, I think now you just it's so instant to put some news up on social media that your competitors are going to be seeing, and therefore you're seeing you're seeing your competitors' news, and it can change how you feel. Like, you can get up in the morning with a spring in your step, but by 11 o'clock in the morning, you're feeling down in the dumps because you've just seen this, delighted to share this new listing post, and it's that property that you valued last Monday, and you thought, I was going to get that. They promised me I was going to come on with me, and you've lost it, and you sit there kicking yourself. And what did you do wrong? And why didn't they use you? And oh God, that agent's that's the third one he's won off me this month. So yes, I suppose it comes down to how much you let yourself get drawn into social media, and I do let myself get drawn into social media. But I suppose that is, it's this dopamine hit you get from social media in the morning. Actually, I was listening to something the other day, said what you should do is make your goal that you see daylight before you check your social media. So because the first thing I do, I don't think my left eye's even opened yet by the time I'm already looking on LinkedIn or Instagram and seeing what's going on. And whoever it was said, sit on the side of your bed, drink a glass of water, go and do something that's effortful but boring, like clean your teeth for 2 minutes, then come back and lay your bed, then go and have breakfast. And then you start to get this different type of dopamine hit. That's a slow, long building bit of dopamine, so that by the time you're then stepping out at 8:15 in the morning and then check your social media, your hormones or your cortisone or whatever it is that's going on is ready to accept this hit and deal with it in a more well-rounded way. And I heard this being talked about by some dude on Radio 4 or Radio 5, and I thought that makes absolute sense. I'm going to try that. I've succeeded once in those 5 days since I heard that.
I mean, but one is better than zero.
Absolutely.
I would say that is a step in the right direction without the least. And people say to me all the time, they're like, oh, you must spend a lot of time on social media. And I'm like producing content and like posting content, absolutely. Like, we post 3 times a day sort of thing. But like consuming it, not really. 5 minutes a day, if I'm unlucky, really? Sort of thing. It makes you sound really selfish, but I'm not really fussed what everyone else is up to, if I'm honest with you.
That's kind of the way to be. I mean, that is it. There's some benefit in knowing what's going on, but as long as you're working out what's going on rather than what people are trying to tell you, I think that's the battle.
Yeah. So let's talk about new chapters. So you are stepping away from the front line of a state agency. So tell me all. So the property pen has been born, and I see it all over my social media. So talk to me what's going on.
So I've launched the property pen, which allows me to basically combine what I'm knowledgeable about and have a passion for, which is property, and it's impossible not to have that after 20 years doing it. But I've always been a writer. I've been a writer my whole life since I can remember. I've written, and that's mainly fictional stuff. But writing and storytelling is what I love doing. And in fact, people know me for doing that, as well as being an estate agent. I'm also an author, and I do poetry, and I write children's books, and I've got one published, and I've got another one coming out. And writing and creating is a passion, is a love, and actually, the bit I loved about the job of estate agency was the communication of what was going on, and whether that was communicating really well in a brochure, or whether it was communicating with the market to say this is what's going on and this is why I think it's important, and whether that be written, which often was, or whether it be video. Because even when I was doing video and people say, oh, you're really good on video, I was only good on video because I knew exactly what I was going to say, because I'd written it all out beforehand, and it's a script. It's just a script. So what the property pen is a way of doing what I love and what worked for me. So what worked for me to help me build my business, and offer that as a service to other estate agents who either love doing it, but they find they just don't have time to do it, or are potentially not very good at it, even if they love it, or they don't love doing it at all, even if they can do it, they just don't love doing it. or perhaps both of those things. They neither love doing it nor have time to do it or want to, but they know it's important. So that's where I can sort of step in and provide a service that they appreciate.
And what sort of mistakes, should we say, are agents making in their sort of copy and their meshing together? What are some of the things you see in people's content where you think, oh, that's not very good?
Well, there's a few answers to that. There's a lot of, I mean, it's going to be an easy thing for me to do to go and attack Chat GPT, for example. AI is going to have a massive part to play in all of our futures. And to be honest, I would say it's really not, the illustration industry. I think illustrators are finding it, and graphic designers, because AI can produce something pretty good very quickly. Although even that's all starting to look the same. But with writing, you could ask ChatGPT to write you 800 words about this interest rate decision that's just happened on Thursday or whatever it might be, and it will come up with 800, fairly decent. It'll be decent. It'll be okay. It'll be well enough strung together sentences in English, but it still doesn't necessarily connect with a market, and it doesn't necessarily become something that somebody is going to want to actually read through to the end. There'll be some benefit when you put content on your blog, for example. There's some benefit to that. There's some benefit to always having something's changed on the website once a week. There's been a change, and Google likes it, and it will help you move up. But actually, unless people are consuming it, unless they're reading it, and in reading it, go, oh yeah, these guys really know what they're talking about, and going, yes, actually, I love exactly that's exactly what I thought. That was what I was worried about, but actually, you've made me feel better. I'm gonna see what you say next week. That's what I want. That's what I want content to be. I want it to be something that hooks people and gets them interested in what your story is. And it's not me putting words into people's mouths. It's me working with estate agents, understanding what their message is, what their brand voice is, what they're trying to achieve, what they do think about the market, and putting that into well-written, well-structured content for them, so that it is what they think that's out there hitting the market and hitting their local markets, and gaining that interest from that local market for people who are potential customers like next week, or maybe they're potential customers in 7 years' time. So this is a kind of a long game kind of thing, but it's really important that you do play the long game. And that's what I did when I had the business. I understood that it was about the long game, and a lot of what you did isn't going to land for months or maybe years, but it does eventually land. And if you've been doing it consistently, you start to reap the benefits. And once the benefits are coming in, and you just don't stop.
I suppose a lot of it is about that sort of silent audience in a lot of the business. For example, we post a blog every Friday. It goes out there, and no one's ever said to me, oh, I read your blog every week and it's amazing, sort of thing. But I know people have mentioned it when they start working and say, oh yeah, I looked at your blog. And it's kind of like one of those things that it's not, there might only get, 1 or 2 likes on your social media, or a couple of shares, whatever it may be, and you don't think it's actually that spectacular. But as you say, over time, people are like, actually, you're the expert because you post all the time. It's regular content. It's always good communication. It's always got a good message. Actually, it gives me stuff I can take away and that kind of action in my life, and it's sort of valuable rather than sort of just token sort of waffle that you've just pressed, copy, paste, go for it sort of thing.
Yes, exactly. And I think a mix as well. I think you want to mix the content so that it's not all one thing. It's not all about interest rates and what they're doing this week. Next week it might be, top 7 ways to present your house in the spring market, or whatever it might be. There's a different mix of content that's all valuable content for your market to start digesting and engaging with, and thinking, yes, I like these guys. I like them.
100%. And we did a podcast. I say we, it's the raw we. It was a solo podcast, probably about a month or 2 ago, about securing digital real estate, and blogs and written content, and keywords written in there. So when people go onto Google and type, how to move home in Oxford, for example, your name and your face comes up first of all is really, really key. So I'm going to ask you a question now that people ask me all the time, so I get to ask it of somebody else. So now you're leaving a state agency in kind of the front line side of things. What are you going to miss? What's the bit you're going to go, actually, I really wouldn't mind doing that still?
So a lot of the job really aggravated me. I mean, I was aggravated all the time in the day-to-day running of the job. But the bits I loved was dealing with people, was dealing with the vendor who's trying to achieve something, and you're finding and you're helping them understand that there's a way of doing that. So I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss just knowing that these people are listening to you, and they're taking what you're saying on board, and they believe that you're the expert that's going to help them. I will miss that, and I will really miss the good news delivery on completion day. I'll miss that, or not, or even exchange of contracts and completion, handing over keys, and being there for that moment where you see that this is the fruits of your labour, of what's ended up being a labour of about 9 months, even though you think you're going to put them on the market, sell it next week, and then 2 months later you've gone through conveyancing and you're handing over keys. It rarely works out like that. So whenever you have these success stories, and I know people criticize estate agents for putting this post up saying just exchange contracts, and of course the estate agent is trying to have a little bit of a brag. What they're really saying is we just earned £5,000, right? But actually, what they are also saying, even if they don't realize it, is we have just succeeded. We've succeeded in this job that we promised this person we were going to do 9 months ago. When we first went out, we had a cup of tea on their sofa and we said, I know exactly how to do this. And then after all of these trials and tribulations, because there always are, we have managed to wrestle this through the marketing period, find a good buyer, keep it all together, get it through conveyancing. And now we've handed over keys to the buyer of their house. And that's a job well done that everybody's happy about. And I'm going to miss that.
Rowan, thank you so much for coming on today. You've been an absolutely brilliant guest. If anybody is looking to, I'm going to give you a shameless shout out now. If anybody's looking to up their sort of written content and their blog content and their sort of company voice, etc., how is the best way of them getting hold of yourself? Is it via your socials? What's the best way?
Well, I'm all over social. So yes, you'll definitely find me there. I mean, I seem to live on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn, Rowan Waller, but it is the Property Pen. So you can email me very easily, rowan@thepropertypen.co.uk, or go and visit the website, thepropertypen.co.uk. And I would love to see you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming, Damien. Brilliant guest. Thank you, man. Obviously, we wish you the best of luck with your new venture. Any way we can help or support, just let us know.
Cheers, Chris. That's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Appreciate it, Rowan. Thanks so much, buddy.